Hello, I'm Pablo Nemo. So, what's going on? What's this whole to be or not to be about? So, this song basically is an exploration on consciousness. In fact, the patch that I'm using in BCB as a whole represents the nested observer Windows model, which simplifying states that consciousness is not a singular entity, but rather is more like a society of thoughts. Think of it a bit like the movie Inside Out or the video game Disco Elysium. Inside that society we have different components, and the fundamental one that inspired this whole process is the building blocks, the microtubules of the orchestrated objective reduction theory by Penrose and Hameroff. To do that model, OR, I'm using ORCA. Let me show you. This is ORCA. So basically, it's an esoteric programming language, which means that it's for programming but not for every single program. This is mostly focused on sequencing music. For example, if I press play, you can see it's moving, and now it's changing the music. In this, we have several sections that represent how microtubules collapse the abstract field of quantum stuff. In the bottom, we have that abstract field. Let me pause this so it's a bit easier. And here we have conceptual entities, like for example the number pi or the script of Hamlet, like to be or not to be. Those can be considered abstract eternal objects, not so much in the theory of Platonic ideas, but more similar to the concept of Whitehead in process philosophy of eternal objects. Doesn't matter, it's complicated, let's not get into that. Here in the middle, we have the translator, basically the fundamental physical entities like atoms and molecules, like benzene rings in the case of OR, that are interacting with that abstract field and are collapsing the wave function into cohesive proto-moments of consciousness, as Hameroff says. And those, at the same time, are going one layer higher in abstraction. Over here, we have the microtubule, quote-unquote, which is the part that actually is outputting MIDI notes to the BCB patch. So you can see those little E's are trigger signals that are activating this part over here on the right, which are the output modules, and the outputs are being modulated by the intermediate layer. So we're changing to which channel are those signals going. We have channel 0 and 1, and also what note is being played. And back to BCB rack. That is, actually, let me put this wide and open. And you can see, by the way, what the oscilloscope is representing are those vibrations on the microtubules. So that comes from here. As you can see, we have two MIDIs that are coming from the loop MIDI digitally internally in the computer, and those outputs are going to a quantizer and to a couple of instances of resonator, which is basically mutable rings, which have a very interesting feedback structure going on, because those are sending signals to these neurons over here, and those neurons are doing all sorts of crazy things. I don't remember exactly what's going on with them, to be honest, but it took me a long time to fine-tune them to create that resonance distortion thingy. And we have two channels for that. We have, these are just the rings playing single notes as triggered by the outputs, and these are the neurons creating the feedback. As you cannot see, but you may intuit, I'm controlling everything with the launchpad. And also from the Orca patch, we have a kick drum that is being triggered every time the microtubule is exporting a trigger signal. However, in the final song, there are more things going on. There are kicks that are not actually present in the patch. I added those on post just to give the song a bit more cohesive structure, basically. Otherwise, it was a bit aleatory. It didn't quite gel as nicely. So yeah, those are the kicks, which are being triggered by Orca, the neurons, which are triggered by rings, which are at the same time triggered by the microtubule in Orca. What else do we have? Well, we have this. This basically is the Pocket Scion by Instruo, and it's a bioelectricity sensor, and usually it quantizes the signal using some fancy algorithms and makes some very nice and pleasant sounds. However, I'm not doing that. I'm using the raw output. So right now, just the bioelectricity that is going through my forehead is creating a signal. And that signal is received over here and is being fed to a couple of pitch shifters. That's what you can hear now. And those pitch shifters are going into a spring reverb just to make it more flat. There were a lot of spikes going on with the signal, because even though it's more or less stable, you can see it's like buzzing in and out, and that was not pleasant at all to listen to. So yeah, and then that is going to a bandpass filter, which I am also controlling with the launchpad. And in fact, let me show you, with the launchpad for the drone we have three things. We have a detune here in the top, which originally I wanted to use a lot to create binaural beats, but in the mix it's very hard to tell them, like the effect doesn't work at all. So in the end it's just a bit of detune. The most important control is the actual pitch, which I use quite a lot during the song to give it more flow, like it's just octave up and octave down. And this controller is managing both the bandpass filter as well as the volts per octave in the rings resonators that come after. And then we also have this over here, which is like a beat crash distortion stuff. So I have another control for that to make it nice and crunchy, very filthy. So that's the bioelectricity resonator stuff. I wanted to use an EEG. Of course, I don't have an EEG, so I'm not using that. But I think it works quite nicely. I'm quite happy with the droning bass thing. We have two more things going on. Next, we have the vocals. Like this. And the vocals are going to a delay, which I'm also controlling with the launchpad over here. So I can choose which sample I'm going to play. Let's say, for example, this is the... One second. Yeah, that's the dry signal. And we have a sample from Hammeroff and another one from Penrose, talking about Orc OR. And then I wanted to mess with auditory illusions. So with the feedback and with the samples, I'm basically trying to tackle two auditory illusions. One is the speech to song illusion, which very simply, if you repeat something enough times, basically looping it, something that originally was just plain speech will feel like it's actually singing, is intentional. Let's say, for example, I load this,
We have to sustain
or this one.
quantum system, quantum system, quantum
Just by repeating quantum system, it feels like Penrose is singing, quote unquote. But also, I wanted to mess with the cocktail party effect. That basically states that when you are focusing on something, on a voice that you know, you can tell that apart more easily in the noise. Imagine you are in a cocktail party and you are trying to listen to a friend of yours. You know how the voice of your friend sounds, so it's easier to tell that voice apart than if you were trying to hear the conversation of that person that you don't know what they are talking about. To do something like that, what I'm doing is messing with the delay. So let's put a lot of feedback, let's put the wets all the way, mess with the time and such, and then change the sample. Well, it's unrecognizable. So right now you cannot recognize what the voice is saying. If I go back to Drive, now you can tell what is going on. And if I go back to the same settings as before, now you can still tell what the original voice was saying, even though it's mostly unrecognizable. So that was quite interesting. I'm very happy with how that vocal looping delay thingy turned out. And there is one more thing in the patch, that are the drums. That was meant to be another auditory illusion called the reset beat, that technically goes on forever. It's like a decelerating or accelerating rhythm that never actually finishes, because as basically it's interlocking a few rhythms that are decelerating or accelerating at different paces, and you are basically turning the volume down as one of those layers reaches the minimum speed, and turning the volume up on a different layer to make it flow seamlessly. It didn't work out, but it was very interesting. Let me show you. So over here we have the BPM that is following an LFO, inverted saw, I think it was. Let's see. Yeah, that goes from the rescale from the inverted saw, exactly. And we have 3 LFOs that have the same rate but different phases. And with that, what I can control is the volume, basically the panning, not the panning, the volume, the amount of those samples that are going through. And the samples themselves are over here in the auto break by Box Glitch. So I tried with different samples and changing them around. It was too messy, it didn't work. So in the end I just used the same sample for the 3 of them and have different subdivisions for the rhythm. So one is slower, the other is a bit faster, and the other is even faster. And all of them are following the descending tempo. As I mentioned, it didn't quite work out as I wanted. It doesn't give you that feeling of eternal deceleration, but it's pretty interesting. So that's it. Let's mute this, go back to the range because I like how that sounds. And the last element in the patch are the visuals. That is also another illusion, in this case optical, and this is the, I don't remember exactly the name, static spinning wheel or something like that. Yeah, I just saw that while I was doing my research for the nested server Windows, and it has to do with the frequency of thoughts. Apparently it's like 10 Hz, something like that. So as I wanted to have something stable for you to focus while you are experiencing this song patch thingy. So yeah, I decided that for both you, the viewer, and me as a performer, I wanted to have that central point of focus that you can follow And even though it is static, it has a very interesting effect going on. Like it feels like it's changing with the music, at least for me when I'm watching the video again. But yeah, just another illusion to add to the illusion consciousness soup. Whatever. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the song and the patch. If you want to use that in BCB Rack, it will be for free. The MIDI signaling will be tricky. You need to get your own audio source and your own custom MIDI controller and an external sequencer, although you can probably replace most of those. With, for example, you can use a Turing machine instead of having the Orca patch, and you can have any other MIDI controller instead of the Launchpad, or use a simple oscillator as the source instead of having the bioelectricity thing. And anyway, thank you for watching and have a lovely day. Bye.